Good evening, everyone, and thank you for listening to the Futurati podcast, where we dive into emerging technologies that will impact the world and your bank account. I'm Thomas Fry, and I'm bringing you a solo episode tonight. My co-host Trent and I are futurists, keynote speakers, and consultants with decades of experience in analyzing trends and communicating new developments to audiences around the world. Reach out to us at futuratipodcast.com/contact-futurati if you'd like to hire us for consulting, to speak at your event, or to advise on our podcast. So the episode tonight was absolutely fascinating. Emery Gunselman is a truly fascinating gentleman who recently got into the space industry and has absorbed just a huge amount just in the past couple of years. And he gave us a real unique insight into how this industry has evolved and how they got started and how they're focused on not manned missions or launch vehicles or any of that, but more about kind of the operational side of things and how they can control things with their go-to operational system. This is a unique episode, and I think you'll love what we have to talk about here. Tonight we are joined by Emery Gunselman. Emery is a former astrodynamics engineer and is currently a satellite operations product owner at Morpheus Space. Morpheus Space is disrupting the new space industry by introducing Agile Constellations, a fusion between cutting-edge electric propulsion and artificial intelligence, which enables satellite service providers to operate entire constellations as one entity. If you enjoyed this interview, please subscribe to the podcast and share with your friends. And don't forget to check out our website, futuratipodcast.com. Emery, thank you so much for coming on the show. Let's hear a little bit about your background, your interest. Emery, thanks for coming on our show.
Hi, Thomas. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Now you're talking to us from space now. Is that correct?
I wish. No, I'm currently in El Segundo at Morpheus Space at our office here. But yeah, one day maybe I'd like to do a podcast from space. That'd be fun. But
all right. Well, can you fill our guests in on kind of the history of Morpheus Space and how you ended up there and what you're hoping to accomplish?
Yeah, definitely. So Morpheus Space was kind of spun out of a research project over at a university in Dresden, Germany. It's been probably over a decade now that research has been going on for this propulsion technology. We do electric propulsion for satellites. And so in 2018 was when we kind of initially launched as a company, and we actually put one of the first FEEP, field emission electric propulsion systems, up on a CubeSat in space, and it performed a collision avoidance maneuver. And since then, the origins were out in Dresden in Germany, and since then we've actually created a new office in Los Angeles here, and that was around, I think, 2020, 2021. I actually graduated university in 2021, and after graduating, I was kind of just exploring, different space startups, especially in the Los Angeles area, because this is a pretty massive space hub, in the world. A lot of new companies popping up all the time around here, and some of the massive primes, have been here for a long time. SpaceX is here. So this is just a really good scene for the emerging space industry. And I'd reached out, to Daniel Bach, our CEO, through LinkedIn, got in contact with our previous president, Istvan Lawrence. And since then, it was history. I started as an intern, and then I came on as a full-time hire. And yeah, started out as an astrodynamics engineer. Now I'm doing more just full comprehensive product development here at Morpheus. It's been quite the journey. Yeah.
Yeah. So how big a company is Morpheus? How many people?
It's still relatively small. So on the U.S. side of things, we've got like 10 to 15 people, and over in Germany, we've got about 30. So overall, like less than 50 people still.
So what's your primary mission then?
The primary mission of Morpheus Space is essentially to accelerate the growth of the space industry through being a leader in space mobility. So our core kind of products center around in-space mobility. So anything to do with moving satellites in space, whether that be through the hardware, like our electric propulsion systems, or through software that helps to augment the propulsion system and then even enhance the capabilities beyond what just traditional hardware can do through software. So doing maneuvers in space, doing mission design and mission planning, just essentially making it as intuitive and easy as possible to do any kind of in-space mobility.
So your goal is not to shoot up astronauts, so you're not climbing into space suits or anything and
No.
lasers at each other or nothing like that.
Yeah, no, not quite yet. Maybe one day we'll expand into other realms of kind of space mobility, but we don't focus currently on any launch vehicle, things like that, or orbital transfer vehicles or interplanetary propulsion, mainly around Earth-centered LEO, MEO, GEO orbital maneuvering is our main.
Okay. So who is your main client then?
So we've got a bunch of different ones, but one of our biggest ones that's public is Spire is one that we provided propulsion systems for.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now you have this go-to system. What's the unique features on this go-to system?
So the go-to, what's pretty special about it is it's built around one of the most efficient propulsion technologies in the world. Like I was mentioning before, FEEP, it's field emission electric propulsion, and that's a form of an ion thruster. So it sounds kind of sci-fi for most people that are familiar with, chemical traditional rockets, where it's basically controlled explosion, very high thrust, coming out of those typical propulsions, but they're not very efficient. And especially for the way that the space industry has been trending towards miniaturized satellites like CubeSats that are very small, traditional chemical propulsion is not always the best option, especially if you're trying to do certain things like orbital maintenance, very precise maneuvering, or adjusting your satellite's attitude or orientation. It's just not always the best option to use. So that's where electric propulsion comes into play. And ion thrusters, specifically FEEP, essentially what happens is you've got a solid metallic propellant, and that gets heated up, and then you apply a voltage, and due to that voltage, an electric field gets created, which then, if you've got a certain, maybe a needle in this case, the propellant can then get accelerated through that electric force, and ions are spit out through the back of the thruster, and that provides the force. And it's very efficient because you get a very high velocity from those ions being spit out, but you don't necessarily get a lot of thrust because you're not moving a lot of mass compared to chemical propulsion. So it's a bit of a trade-off where you don't necessarily get where you want to go very quick, but it's very efficient. So you can extend your mission lifetime considerably compared to chemical propulsion, where you'll run out of propellant a lot quicker. So you can potentially have missions that are dynamically changing due to maneuvers for multiple years up in space instead of potentially deorbiting in less than that. So,
yeah. Do you ever have the mission to pull a satellite out of space and drop it into orbit and burn it up?
Yeah, so that's one of the great things about our propulsion system is that, due to the exponential growth of the amount of satellites being put up into space, there's a lot of space debris that's going to continue to gather up there. And in order to mitigate that, you need to have some kind of mechanism to deorbit. And one of the best things about that is having an efficient propulsion system where you can still do all of your mission objectives and maneuvers and then still have enough propellant at the end of the mission lifetime in order to safely get your satellite down in the atmosphere and then burn up on reentry. There's also other innovative thoughts and technologies out there in terms of doing active deorbits where you could potentially have vehicles that kind of capture other satellites or debris up there and kind of forcefully pull them down into the atmosphere. And with that, you also need propulsion to accomplish.
Yeah.
Hello, this is Trent Fowler, co-host of the Futurati podcast. One of the most common pieces of marketing advice I've come across is to know your audience and give them what they want. One difficulty in podcasting is that it's actually pretty hard to do this. None of the major platforms give us any way to reach out to you, our listeners, to find out what you enjoy about the Futurati podcast and what you'd like to see done differently. So we've decided to record this commercial and ask you directly to reach out to us. Head over to futuratipodcast.com, go to the contact page, and drop us a line. Tell us about your favorite and least favorite episodes, what you'd like to see us cover in the future, and anything else you want us to know. We produce this show for you, and we want your advice so we can make it even better. Thank you.
Are you working at all with SpaceX?
No, currently we are not.
Okay. Now there's going to be a lot more satellites up in space very soon with the Chinese shooting a whole bunch up, and then there's a lot of countries getting into the space industry. India wants to be a big player. There's different players in Europe. So are you working with any foreign companies at the moment?
Yeah, so obviously being from Germany, we've got a lot of influence over in Europe and a lot of partnerships over there. But even as you mentioned, with a lot of other emerging countries trying to get into the space, we've done business as well with up and coming and developing nations and their space programs that they're trying to get off the ground and running. So ideally trying to I think space is an industry where it doesn't have to be super cutthroat and competitive. I think if everyone wins, or the better everyone does, the more that everyone wins, kind of thing, because there's certain integral pillars of the industry where if they're not there or they're not successful, then the rest of the industry can be drastically affected. So it's one of those things where I think the more that everyone succeeds, the better everyone else does. So
right. Yeah. So your electric propulsion system really sets you apart then. Now, do you have any competitors in that space, or they're using a different technology? Is that correct?
Yeah. So there's a range. So electric propulsion has been around for quite a while. There's been research done since the 60s, and but only until recently has some of the forms of electric propulsion. The technology has gotten to the point where it can be commercialized, especially through FEEP, like ourselves. Like I said, the first time a maneuver was done in space with it was 2018 on a CubeSat. So yeah, there is a couple other companies. FEEP is a bit more of an emerging kind of technology for electric propulsion, but there are other companies that use Hall effect thrusters, which have been around for a while, other electrosprays and other kind of ion thrusters. But it's definitely a more emerging market, and more development and cutting edge advances are being made all the time. So
okay, well, this is really fascinating. There seems to be a growing interest to get people back up into space, and but space is a very unforgiving environment, and so when you add people to the mix, then that changes the requirements in such a massive way. It would seem to me that while some of the plans are to create some sort of a colony on the moon or on Mars, it would seem like the first phase should be to actually send robots up there to actually build the base and do all the groundwork for having humans come there. Rather than to, I don't know, give an astronaut a shovel and have him dig a hole to live in.
Right. Yeah. I think that space is probably actually one of the biggest industries where robotics will play a huge role, and will be almost a necessity in order to accelerate the growth of the industry as people see it. As you said, space is a very inhospitable place and unforgivable, and especially with the amount of proliferation of satellites, and just how at a base level, you're dealing with essentially trying to communicate at a computer going tens of thousands of miles per hour. It's just a very difficult problem that humans can't always just necessarily do, as hands-on. You need to have a lot of automation and a lot of robotics in order to accomplish these goals, especially at scale.
So you have a kind of an insider perspective on things. So when do you actually think we'll get a colony on Mars or a colony on the moon? And what's your best?
Yeah. I mean, it's tough to say. I mean, I hope by 2030. For Mars, that might be pushing it. It could be early 30s to mid 30s, but I hope by 2030. And then, or at least, some kind of base presence there, maybe not a full colony. And then the moon, obviously, I think will probably be somewhat before that. I mean, with the Artemis program, hopefully that all stays on schedule and everything. And, by the late 20s, we've got some kind of presence there. And hopefully a lunar economy, starts thriving, and that'll be a huge base in order to do other interplanetary operations and get to Mars. So,
well, they can always sell cheese.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah. When you talk about a lunar economy, that seems, it seems far out, but but it's probably not. Yes. So having, now I'm sure you're working on other things rather than just your thrusters. And I'm sure that you're, go through brainstorming sessions and you go down different rabbit holes and try to decide on what makes sense and what doesn't. Are there some other areas you could talk about with your company?
Yeah. So besides the thrusters, we've got a cloud platform called Journey, and that essentially is to provide all the software needs throughout the mission lifecycle, especially around space mobility, but essentially from the early preliminary mission design phase, where you're still kind of figuring out your mission and system requirements that you want your mission to accomplish, and then trying to kind of tailor around and refine those requirements into a more advanced mission design product, and then all the way leading to operations when you're actually in orbit and doing mobility there. So it's meant to be like a one-stop mobility kind of shop for all the needs, and just to make it very an expedited process, because currently, a lot of the mission life cycles for satellites, it's a year to 2 years. It's a very long, intensive process, and ideally, in order to scale up, those timelines need to be shortened exponentially. So the goal is to make it very quick and easy for people to do what traditionally has been a very complicated and long process, and also make it kind of just intuitive and fun and visually appealing. Traditional tools have been kind of boring and hard to use, and a very steep learning curve. And so our goal is to kind of just modernize the process and democratize it, if you will, in order to account for just the growing demand and needs. So.
I've often said that the cars that we drive today have actually been in development for the last 120 years. Yep. So it's taken that long to get to cars that are this good. Mm-hmm. So we're still, like in the space industry, we're in the real early stages still. So we haven't got 100 years of history yet to rely on.
I like to sometimes try to compare it. I mean, I don't know that we'll ever get it to the point where it's like using an iPhone, but I think that's a good goal to have. Is currently space to most people is just so far out there and so complicated, and just doesn't seem like a reality. But when someone's using especially, a device as complicated as an iPhone, right? It's like one of the pinnacles of human achievements, but there's so much going on. It's insanely complicated device, but the average person, it's very easy for them to use. It's fun to use. It's all that, and I don't know if space will ever be quite that consumer friendly, but at least working towards that, I think it's a good goal.
Yeah, well, keep in mind the phone has been in development for the past 120 years as well. So.
Yeah.
So when I was a kid, it was common that everybody had a toolbox in the back of their car because cars just broke down. I mean, that was so common, and everybody had to be half mechanic that drove a car because there's little things to tweak and little things to fix. Now, that's really not possible in the space industry, though. You don't want to send toolboxes along. Well, you probably do, but if you have astronauts up there, but it's a whole different mindset when you get into advanced technology like you're working on.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even right, that's a huge emerging kind of sector of the space industry is in orbit servicing and even manufacturing up there. So if there is something that breaks down or it needs to be fixed, that combine that with robotics, then you can easily hopefully repair something or refuel your satellite rather than just throwing it away, having to redevelop. So it'll be more of a sustainable kind of ecosystem up there.
Yeah. I've heard several people refer to the gas stations in space idea. Yeah, it's hard to get the attendants to work up there, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. But getting fuel in space is not an easy thing. Can you kind of step us through some of the thinking on how that would be accomplished?
So I mean, obviously, right, the more mass that you try to put in space, the more expensive it gets.
Right.
But with the decrease of launch prices, largely, due to SpaceX and other launch technologies being improved, hopefully that cost continues to get driven down, and eventually to a point where that maybe will be more economically feasible in order to bring that kind of mass needed up into orbit. And then there's also other alternatives, like asteroid mining, where you can extract resources from there, where you don't then have to launch it from Earth or even right the moon and other places. So kind of just driving overall launch costs down and costs across the industry as well too, in terms of manufacturing and everything, I think will hopefully alleviate certain burdens and then also open up new opportunities that people haven't thought of before.
Yeah, I've read quite a bit about the space mining industry and how potentially lucrative that can be moving forward, especially finding the exact right asteroid to latch onto and bring back. That would seem like such a massive endeavor, though. It seemed like because they're not close by. And you have to find them, and you have to know what's inside of them, and there's a whole lot of details you have to have before you can make it all work. How close are we to actually being able to latch onto an asteroid and bring it back to Earth?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I'm definitely no expert in that, but I mean, there's been many companies that have tried, and unfortunately they've failed. They've gone bankrupt. So I'm not sure if the economics or the feasibility of it is quite there yet, but hopefully within the next decade that's possible for sure. Especially as we create other bases on the moon and other places. But yeah, I think it's a whole logistics issue. It's a whole once you're there, that whole mining operation, especially to bring back enough material that makes it worth it, and then also moving all that material again, that's also prohibitive in terms of the mobility aspects, right, of the propulsion needed. So it's just a very extensive process that's not just like one singular aspect of the space industry, but almost combines a lot of it. So I think the further along that all the different segments of the space industry progress, that will enable more kind of multidisciplinary sectors like space mining, because it kind of ties a lot of other independent sectors of the space industry together. So hopefully not too much longer, but
yeah. Yeah, the one thing that I don't think most people realize is that when you had astronauts like Alan Shepard and John Glenn going up into space, the one thing they really couldn't be is claustrophobic, because they had virtually no space at all to move or breathe and in their capsules. And everything's in such confined spaces up there that that it's not everybody can adapt to that kind of stringent environment. So you have some opportunities coming up at Morpheus there. Can you talk a little bit about that?
What opportunities are you referring to in specific?
I thought you had something that people could apply for.
Oh, right. Yeah. So our cloud platform Journey, we're currently in beta access. So if you just head to Morpheus Space, you can kind of take a look over our offerings with that, and then also just request access to access the platform.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then you can. What does that get you then? You get access to the platform, and you can view things from space. Is that how it works?
No. So currently we offer two main products on the cloud platform: preliminary mission design and then advanced mission design. So our preliminary mission design product essentially takes you through the early stages, where you can either choose like a template if you don't fully know what exact mission you're looking for, and or you can do your custom mission and input all your parameters that you know about your mission. And then we do simulations that kind of go through the orbital design and maneuvers, and then after that we output analytics and other kind of features from the simulation, and then also based off some preliminary parameters, try to match you with certain subsystems. So currently we match users with propulsion systems, and in the future we're looking to also match them with other subsystems that make up the satellite, like communications, power, ADCS. So that's our preliminary mission design, where people try to kind of refine their mission and system requirements. And then advanced mission design is when they're a bit further along in the satellite and mission design life cycle, and they can input more exact parameters and simulate higher fidelity and just really refine their mission and system, and right before they're getting ready to launch. So those are our two products that we offer right now.
Are you enjoying this episode of the Futurati Podcast? If so, please like it, give the show a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and share it with your friends. By far, the best way to help us grow is to spread the word on social media, which will expose our content to more people and help us continue to bring you interviews with world-leading experts in AI, quantum computing, cryptocurrencies, and so much more. Thank you in advance.
So you're hoping to stimulate a lot of thinking in the space industry then?
Yeah, ideally. I mean, well, what's great about it is that even though traditionally, they are very complex topics, and, there's astrodynamics involved and things like that, we try to make it very intuitive and very simple for people to use, very quick, so that hopefully it accelerates that whole process a lot more, and just makes it a lot more fun and enjoyable.
Well, that's very cool. Now, do you give tours of Morpheus Space?
Oh, we do. If you stop by, yeah, we'd be more than happy to give a tour. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You don't have a big sign out there, tours happening at 1:00 and
No, unfortunately not. No.
free wine at the end of the tour.
No, but that'd be a good idea. Yeah, I'll pass that along.
Yeah, yeah. This just sounds very cool. I think there's a part of a lot of us that just likes the idea of going into space because we were raised with Star Trek and the Jetsons and Star Wars came along. The thing about Star Trek that always irritated me is that so many of their episodes were based on a turf war, and that just seemed wrong because space is very big, and then
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of space out there.
turf wars in space. That's stupid.
Yeah, it's like just go find another planet, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That yeah, that mindset hadn't seeped into all their thinking yet. Yeah, so what and now are we really grooming enough people to go into the space industry? Training them in colleges? Do we have enough of a talent base for what we hope this is going to mushroom into in the near future?
I mean, I think so. I think a lot of people, recently the space industry has seen kind of a resurgence, dawn of a new age, a new kind of Wild West that I think a lot of people are excited about, myself including. I definitely think the interest is there, and seeing that we're actually kind of doing things again and making what seemed impossible possible, and the pace at which it's happening, I think is very exciting. So I definitely think we've got the talent and enough of a will, and a lot of people have that kind of grand vision to pursue it. So I definitely think it's there. Yeah, I've got bright hopes for the future for sure.
All right. How is AI changing your industry, and how do you think that will evolve over the next 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think AI will. I mean, it is, playing somewhat of a role right now, but I think it will play even a bigger role within the next 10 years, definitely, because it's an industry where it kind of needs to. I mean, the space industry has always kind of been on the cutting edge of technology, by kind of necessitation, but also I think AI, in order to accomplish a lot of the growing demands that the industry is having, AI will be necessary. For instance, the massive constellations that are being put up, there's just no way to have a human interact with all those satellites and make sure that there's no collisions and all the operations are going smoothly. AI is by necessity, needed in order to manage that many satellites. Data analytics, that are all the massive amounts of data that's being collected by satellites all the time. That's going to need AI to process all of that, and many other applications. It's going to play a huge role in. So I think AI will definitely be a massive part of the space industry.
Yeah. So one of the featuring techniques we use is we talk about firsts, and every emerging industry has a number of firsts in different categories. Like the first person on Mars, we already had the first person on in space, the first person on the moon, but sooner or later we're going to have the first child born in space, and we haven't really got a good handle on what what effects that's going to have on that child. And
yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm sure maybe there's been some kind of research done on the ISS with like microgravity effects on biology, but obviously no actual experiments have been carried out with that. It's funny too, because I thought about, the first person that will be born on Mars will actually be known as a Martian, which is kind of fun.
Yeah,
we'll see. I guess only time will tell what that will affect. But I definitely, based off of prolonged periods of astronauts being in space, have heard that it can definitely lead to detrimental kind of long-term effects in microgravity if you're up there long enough. So
yeah. So I have a home that's close to Boulder, Colorado, and we had the National Institute of Standards there. And I was thinking about it one day that once we go to a different planet, virtually every standard that we have in the U.S. or on Earth goes away. When you're on another planet, the day-night cycles are different. The weights and measurement cycles are different. Maybe you could still use the distance, but I'm not sure it makes sense anymore. But virtually everything that we're currently used to, and I always look at all the sci-fi movies that are out, and they say, yeah, you spent 10 days there. Had to go 12 miles or something like that. And none of that's relevant anymore. And that's, I think, something that we tend to forget how different this environment is than every other one that's out there. And so communicating across the space is, there's huge time gaps that we're going to run into. And so the number of challenges are substantial. And then the one thing that, I don't know, doesn't ever seem to get talked about at all is the magnetosphere that we have here on Earth, that holds our atmosphere in. Is it at all possible to create an artificial magnetosphere that?
That's a good question. I feel like it would be, right. I think anything like that is possible. That seems like a massive undertaking to do, right? Because obviously we've got this spinning kind of metallic planet that's creating that. So it definitely maybe somehow strengthen another one. Yeah, that definitely seems like a massive undertaking though. Right.
So I mean, that just having an atmosphere that sticks around, that doesn't get spun off into space. I mean, this idea of terraforming doesn't make sense if you can't hold on to the atmosphere.
Yeah, or if you've got too much of a atmosphere like Venus, and then you're just cooking everything that's all in there. Yeah, it's a very kind of happy medium.
Right. Yeah. So do you do you spend your time as kind of an ambassador for Morpheus then, talking about all the good stuff you're working on?
A little bit. No, I mean, I kind of, I've been around here for a little bit, for about 2 years. And when I joined, it was a very small team in the U.S. So I've kind of gotten to know the company intimately and kind of grown with it. So I spend most of my time, on the product development here, but anytime that I get to, spread what we're doing and, put out a good vision of the future of the space industry out there, I'll take it, so.
Yeah. Well, it would seem like, I mean, we live in a very distracted society. We're very distracted with stuff we see in Hollywood and, all the conversations happening online and social media. And so it would seem like the toughest thing that you're dealing with there is being able to focus on your core mission, because it's so easy to go down these rabbit holes and they seem way more exciting. If we could just do this, we could have so much more fun. Maybe we could get 5 more clients. Who knows?
Yeah. The good idea fairy definitely comes around quite a bit, especially, in the space industry, because there's constantly new and exciting ideas all the time. And you really gotta, sometimes they're worth pursuing, but sometimes you have to kind of zoom back out and see the whole picture and where you originally are headed and kind of where you want to go, and make sure that it kind of aligns with that path.
Yeah. So it seemed like the toughest job then for your CEO is just constantly saying no.
Yeah, that's definitely a big factor is to learn when to say no. Yeah.
You can work on that in your spare time, but don't work on it here. Yeah. That's fascinating. Now, do you constantly go back and forth to Germany then?
No. It's very rare that, honestly, our two teams kind of all come together as one. For the most part, in Germany, they're working on the hardware and propulsion side of things, and here in the U.S., we mostly focus on software, along with other like business development, marketing, things like that. So, in some ways, we're kind of distinct in that where we don't often come together, but we still have that kind of core vision and core message that we're going after. So,
all right. So what's your vision 10 years from now that Morpheus Space is going to be? What kind of company will it, what will it look like? And I'm sure you'll be in charge at that point. So can you give us that 10-year out vision?
Yeah, it's hard to predict just in general what the space industry is going to be like in 10 years. Right, a lot of us probably can't even imagine some of the things that will be around. But ideally, Morpheus is the leaders of in-space mobility, right, in terms of also like propulsion technology and the software to enable, so basically full stack mobility in space, and also basically slowly dismantling all the traditional pillars that have been obstacles, to getting into space. The fact that it's expensive, risky, and complicated. We'd like to ideally make in-space mobility very cheap, not have prohibitively cost propulsion systems, have the software not be prohibitively expensive either. In terms of it being risky, a lot of that is because you've got all these objects flying thousands of miles per hour up there. And so in order to avoid having any kind of damage or risk to your assets, having the propulsion system and the automation to maneuver your assets away so that they're not at risk is a core tenet too. And then make it not complicated, fun and easy to use.
Right.
You're not spending most of the time learning about something that you only do once, and it's very time consuming, but instead it's kind of developed through software and automation that just makes it kind of a click of a button, kind of an afterthought. So that's ideally, I think, if we can pursue our vision of in-space mobility while trying to dismantle those pillars, I think that'd be a great place to be in 10 years.
Okay.
Do you need a dynamic and knowledgeable speaker for an event? Thomas Fry and me, Trent Fowler, are both seasoned keynote speakers, able to converse on a wide array of topics to audiences of all sizes and skill levels. Go to the contact page at futuraudypodcast.com to book Thomas or myself today, and let us apply our years of experience in public speaking to make your event a smashing success.
Yeah. I remember in the 1980s, there was a gentleman, Gerald Bull, that had this idea of having the big guns that would just shoot satellites into space. And so far that hasn't worked.
Yeah.
I think that has some interesting potential, but I'm sure that there's all kinds of reasons why that doesn't work. But, well, this has been absolutely fascinating. Do you have any last words that you'd like to share with our audience?
I guess just essentially that, the space industry is a lot of people might not realize, but it's entering a new kind of age, a new kind of Wild West frontier kind of era that's very exciting. And if you basically at all are interested in it, I definitely would recommend getting in the industry, because now's the time to be a part of something amazing. And it's a bright future, I think, for humanity in space.
Yeah, it's growing much faster now. It's not this onesie twosie stuff. It's growing really fast. So.
Yeah, definitely.
I really appreciate you taking the time to join us here. And if somebody wants to get in touch with you, how do they get in touch with you?
So for the most part, you could go to Morpheus.space for our website, and reach out through our business development team. In terms of me personally, I guess I've got a LinkedIn, but besides that, Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate you joining us here and filling us in on all the crazy little details that go into making a company like this work. I wish you the best, and hopefully sometime in the future we'll run into each other in space.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And it's a great conversation. So appreciate it. Thank you.